halfway through. It's about an 800-page book. I just thought it was important because it's significant to our history. And if we're going to understand, I feel like historical materialism is so important to understand things, to see patterns and see where the things evolve. Like instantly, you can connect the Epstein class to the beginning foundations of American society. You know what I mean? With the enslavement and trafficking of people and eating. You know what I mean? So like, it's nothing new. And like when you read the history, you're like, yep, not new. This is where it rooted. You can see where it roots from and stuff like that. You know? But anyways, we're going to get started here. I'm a minute late. Sorry, everybody. And we're on, I don't know what chapter this is, but it says Black Proletariat in South Carolina. So here we go. And forgive me for my reading. I appreciate it. Anyways, hey, Sebastian. Good to meet you. How in the years from 1868 to 1876, in a state where black people outnumbered whites and the will of the mass of black labor, modified by their own and other leaders, and deemed by ignorance, inexperience, and uncertainty, dictated the form and method of government. A great political scientist in one of the oldest and largest of American universities wrote and taught thousands of youth and readers that, here's what he said, there is no question now that Congress did a monstrous thing in committing a great political error, if not a sin, in the creation of this new electorate. It was a great wrong to civilization to put the white race of the South under the domination of the black race. The claim that there is nothing in the color of the skin from the point of view of political ethics is a great sophism. So sophism is like, we're going to look at sophism real quick. We're going to look that up. I know what it is, I just can't explain it. So sophism, a clever, plausible, but ultimately false argument intending to deceive or mislead. Okay. Often use fallacious reasoning. Okay. Explain, hold on, let's see here. Sophism is a clever but false fallacious argument. Okay. All right, so it's a fallacious argument. It's not what I'm thinking of. A black skin means membership in a race of men which has never of itself succeeded in subjecting passion to reason, has never therefore created any civilization of any kind. Ew. Here is the crux of all national discussions and study of Reconstruction. The problem is I can't say that word. Figures. There it is. I think that's it right there. This is incontently, I think. Incontinently. There we go. Incontinently. And that means the inability to volunteer, control bladder, or okay. Okay. Where was I at? Sorry, everybody. Crooks. Okay, hold on. Incontinently, but beyond investigation and historic proof by the dictum of Judge Taney, Andrew Johnson, John Burgess, and their conferers, that black people are not men and cannot be regarded and treated as such. The students who would wrest this dictum by facts is faced by this set barrier. The whole history of Reconstruction has, with new conception, been written by passionate believers in the inferiority of black people. The whole body of facts concerning that black people actually said and did, how he worked, what he wanted, for whom he voted, is masked in such a cloud of charges, exaggeration, and biased testimony. that most students have given up all attempt at new of the old, and simply repeated perfunctorily all the current legends of black buffoons and legislators, golden spittoons for field hands, bribery, and extravagance on the unheard of scale, and the collapse of civilization until an outraged nation rose in wrath and ended the ridiculous travesty. And yet there are certain quite well-known facts that are irreconcilable with this theory of history. Civilization did not collapse in the South in 1868 and 1876. The charge of industrial anarchy is faced by the fact that the cotton crop had recovered by 1870, 5 years after the war, and by 1876, the agriculture and even commercial and industrial rebirth of the South was in sight. The public debt was large by measured and depreciating currency and estimated with regard to war losses and the enlarged functions of a new society. It was not excessive. The legislation of this period was not bad, as is proven by the fact that it was retained for long periods after 1876, and much of it still stands. One must admit that generalization of this sort are liable to wide error, but surely they can justifiably be balanced against the extreme charges of a history written for purposes of propaganda. And above all, no history is accurate, and no public scientific that starts with the gratuitous assumption that the black race has been proven incapable of modern civilization. Such a dogma is simply the modern of American residue of a universal belief that most men are subnormal and that civilization is the gift of a chosen few. Ew, that's so disgusting. Oh, I got my first restriction. That's so disgusting. What? Sounds smart, but means nothing. Okay. Since the beginning of time, most thinkers have believed that the vast majority of human beings are incorrigible, unintelligent, and evil. The proportion of thinkers who believe this has naturally changed with historical evolution. In earliest times, all men, but the chosen few, were impossible. Before the middle class of France revolted, only the aristocracy of birth and knowledge could know and do. After the American experiment, a considerable number of thinkers conceived that possibly most men had capabilities except, of course, black people. Possibly never in human history before or since have so many men believed in the manhood of so many men as after the Battle of Port Hudson, when black people fought for freedom. All men knew that by sheer weight of physical force, the mass of men must in the last resort become the arbiters of human action. But reason, skill, wealth, machines, and power may for long periods enable the few to control the many. But to what end? The current theory of democracy is that dictatorship is a stopgap pending the work of universal education, equitable income, and strong character, but always the temptation to use the stopgap for narrower ends because intelligence, thrift, and goodness seems so impossibly distant for most men. We rule by Junta, or Wanta, is Junta. We turn fascist because we do not believe in men. Yet the basis of fact in this disbelief is incredibly narrow. We know perfectly well that most human beings have never had a decent human chance to be full men. Most of us may have convinced that even with opportunity The number of uttered human failures would be vast. And yet, remember that this assumption kept the ancestors of present white America long in slavery and degradation. It is then one's moral duty to see that every human being, to the extent of his capacity, escapes ignorance, poverty, and crime. With this ideal held unswervingly in view, monarch, oligarchy, dictatorship may rule, but the end will be the rule of all, if mayhap all or must qualify. The only unforgivable sin is dictatorship for the benefit of fools. Okay, crew. I have no idea what this word is. We're gonna look this word up, everybody. Hey, Cisco. 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's go find out what this person means. Oh, great! Another invisible pill. Look at that. All right, VOLUPTUARIES. What is this?
Voluptuaries.
Voluptuaries, an individualistic, exclusively devoted to luxury, comfort, and sensual pleasure.
Voluptuaries.
Voluptuaries. Gilded satraps, prostitutes, and unintelligent people. The rule of the famished, oh my gosh, unlittered, sinking mob is better than this, and the only inevitable logical and justifiable return. To escape from the ultimate democracy is as impossible as it is for arrogant poverty and crime to rule forever. The opportunity to study a great human experiment was present in Reconstruction, and its careful scientific investigation would have thrown a light on human development and democratic government. The material today, however, is unfortunately difficult to find. Little effort has been made to preserve the records of Black efforts and speeches, actions, works, and wages, homes, and families. Nearly all this has gone down beneath the mass of ridicule and caricature, deliberate omission, and misstatement. No institution of learning has made any effort to explore or probe Reconstruction from the point of view of the laborer, and most men have written to explain and excuse the former slaveholders and planters and landholders and the capitalists. The loss today is irreparable. And this present study limps and gropes in darkness, lacking most essentials to a complete picture. And yet the writer is convinced that this is the story of a normal working class movement, successful to an unusual degree, despite all disappointments and failures. South Carolina has always been pointed to as a typical Reconstruction state. It had in 1860 412,320 Black people and 291,300 whites. Even at the beginning of the 19th century, the 200,000 whites were matched by 150,000 Black people, and the influx from the border and the direct African slave trade brought a mass of Black slaves to support the new Cotton Kingdom. There had always been small numbers of free Black people, a little over 33,000 at the beginning of the century, and nearly 10,000 in 1860. Slavery was the driving force of the state industrial and social life. It was the institutions which made South Carolina different from the states of the North. It was the principal reason why the white manhood of the state had fought so desperately. The economic loss which came through war was great, but not nearly as influential as the psychological change. The change in habit and thought. Imagine the 54th Massachusetts Regiment of Color. They did it the opposite way. Headed the Union troops, which entered Charleston and singing, quote, John Brown's body, end quote. A nun writes from the city concerning the changes which have come and which seem to her unspeakable. This is what she said. Could you but see these delicate ladies in houses void of furniture, reduced to the washtub and the crock pot, your heart would bleed. There were other Carolina women, not to be sure ladies, quote unquote, to whom the chance up to wash and cook for themselves spelled heaven in these days. That's the end of her. Hello. The hatred of the Yankee was increased. The defeated Southern leaders were popular heroes. Numbers of Southerners planned to leave the country and go to South America or Mexico. And yet the slaveholders had not lost all by any means. There was 638 persons in South Carolina who were later pardoned by President Johnson because they had taxable property worth more than $20,000. They had their land, their tools, and while certain cities had been wrecked and pillaged, the great mass of the plantation had not been touched. The railroads had been injured, but not destroyed. Most of the 18th cotton factories were not touched. The labor situation, the prospects for free black people, caused great apprehension. It was accepted as absolutely true by most planters that black people could not and would not work without a white master. And here's what they said. The N-word, sir, is a S-word, whom the Almighty Maker appointed to be a slave. A S-word, with him free. The South is ruined, sir, ruined. So they use the S word as they call indigenous people. So they did that directed towards the towards black people. When black people heard that freedom was coming, okay. On the other hand, these apprehensions were not fulfilled. William Henry Prescott said, when black people heard that freedom was coming, there was no impatience, no insubordination, no violence. They have received their freedom quietly and soberly. They remain pretty steady on the farms of their masters, a very general disposition being manifested to adjust the terms of compensation on the reasonable basis. One great and real loss which the state suffered was the 12,922 men killed in battle, the dead of wounds. Perhaps it can be concluded that the lack of distinctive achievements by South Carolinians since the war is in no small measure due to this loss. It was estimated by the census that land values declined 60% between 1860 and 1867, and that all farm property between 1860 and 1870 decreased from 1,169,738,634 to $47,628,175. In May 1865, a meeting was held in Charleston, and a committee was sent to talk with President Johnson. He asked them to submit a list of names from which he might select a provisional governor. And he finally selected Benjamin F. Perry. This was, on the whole, an unfortunate selection. Perry was a devoted follower of Johnson and believed that Johnson had the power and backing to put his policy through. He immediately succeeded in having all black troops withdrawn, and he was certain that the North was with him and Johnson in standing for a purely white man's government. Number one, the Johnson Convention met and took some advanced steps. By a small majority, they did away with property qualifications for members of the legislature. but refused to count black people as basis of apportionment. This was a blow at the former slaveholders and a step forward towards democracy, so far as whites were concerned, but it was coupled with absolute refusal to recognize the black people. Perry insisted on letting property retain its right of representation in the legislature, despite the opposition of President Johnson. The convention wanted to abolish slavery only on the condition that black people be confined to manual labor and that slave owners be compensated. They were given to understand, however, that Johnson would not accept this, and they finally declared that since the slaves have been emancipated by the United States, slavery should not be reestablished. In the election for this convention, there was little interest. Only about 1/3 of the normal vote was cast on the coast and inland. There were, in many cases, no elections at all. In the election which followed again, only 19,000 votes were cast. Ex-Governor Orr received a small majority and would have been beaten by Wade Hampton if Hampton had not refused to use the use of his name. Orr was a man of striking personality, and he had once been Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. The legislature, which met after this election, passed one of the most vicious of the black codes. It provided for corporal punishment, vagrancy, and apprenticeship laws, openly made black people an inferior caste, and provided special laws for his governing. And I think we're going to hear this. Neither humanity nor expediency demanded such sharp distinction between the races in opposing punishment. The restriction of black testimony to cases in which the race was involved was not common sense. The free admission of such testimonies in all cases would not have involved the surrender of power by the whites, since there were to be the judges and jury. The occupational restriction insisted of trending to restore order, creating the impression that the dominant race desires to exclude black people from using useful employment. It was impractical for the poverty-stricken Commonwealth to have projected such elaborate schemes of judicial and military reorganization. Horrible. They're horrible people. Analyzing the history of Reconstruction. There was increasing difficulty in the economic situation. The war had ended late in the spring of 1865, so that the crops of that year were short, and there were crops failures for the next 2 years. All this complicated matters. In addition to this, the splendid start which black people had on their hands at Port Royal and on the Sea Islands was interrupted. Johnson proclamation and orders in 1865 provided for the early restoration of all property except property in slaves in such of the Port Royal lands as had been sold for taxes. The landlords hurried to get their pardons and to take back their land. Black people resisted, sometimes with physical force. When some of the landlords visited Adestio Island, black people told them, quote, you had better go back to Charleston and go to work there. And if you can do nothing else, you can pick oysters and earn your living, end quote. But these white men were not used to earn their own living. They were used to have black people do that for them. And now they had the federal government back of their claims. General Howard came down to facilitate the transfer and explain the conditions to black people. Still, the black folk were dissatisfied. They drew up a petition to President Johnson, asking for at least an acre and a half of land. The planters became unbearing, and black anger. Saxon who had placed them on the land was dismissed and Howard deprived of his power, so that finally, by federal force, black people were compelled to leave most of the land and to make contracts with common laborers. The Third Freedmen's Bureau Bill gave this the force of law. Thousands of black migrants migrated to Florida during 1866 and 1876 and 67 because of the land difficulties, the labor contracts, and the crop failures. 2,500 migrated to Liberia. Landholders used force, fraud, and boycott against farm labor. It was declared in 1868 that in South Carolina, the whites do not think it's wrong to shoot, stab, or knock down black people on slight provocation. It is actually thought a great point among certain classes to be able to boast that one can kill or beaten a black person. The following resolutions were passed at public meetings and planters in South Carolina. Here's a resolve that if inconsistent with views of the authorities to remove the military, we express the opinion that the plan of the military to compel the freedom to contract with his former owner, when desired by the latter, is wise, prudent, and absolutely necessary. Resolve that we, the planters of the district, pledge ourselves not to contact with any freeman unless he can produce a certificate of regular discharge from his former owner. Resolved that under no circumstances, however, will we rent land of any freeman, nor will we permit them to live on our premises as employees. In Abbeville district in South Carolina, it was said, here a planter worked nearly 100 hands near Chokesburg, 10 of them on South Carolina Railroad for 6 months. The planters received their wages, and the remainder on his plantation, raising a crop of corn, wheat, rice, cotton, etc. After the crop was harvested, the laborers were brought to Charleston, where, being destitute, they had to be rationed by the government. After their arrival in this city, the planters distributed $50 among them. The largest amount anyone received was $1.25, and from that down to 50 cents. Some received nothing. 1 peck of dry corn a week was the only ration furnished the farm hands. So basically, they just said, "Fuck it, we'll kind of want it, but we'll just pay you the most minimum thing we can." See, not slavery, not free labor. We'll give you 25 cents. Fuck it. Weird. Meantime, the growth of sentiment in favor of black suffrage was quickening because the actions of South Carolina and other states. Chief Justice Chase visited the state and spoke to black people. He said, quote, "I believe there is not a member of the government who would not be pleased to see universal suffrage," end quote. Black people were already bestirring themselves. In May 1864 at Port Royal, they held a meeting which elected delegates to a National Union Convention, which was to be held in Baltimore in June. In November 1865, people of color met at Zion Church, Charleston, and protested against the work of the convention and of the legislature. The legislature refused to receive this petition and determined to ignore the matter of black suffrage entirely, or attended the National Union Convention in Philadelphia in 1866 and advised the legislature to reject the 14th Amendment. This legislature did with only one negative vote in both houses. The military commander under the Reconstruction legislation did much to abolish discrimination. One captain of a vessel was fined who refused to allow a woman of color to ride as a first-class passenger. And General Canby, a Kentuckian, whom Johnson appointed in March 1867, ordered black people serve in jurors. Ordered that black people serve in jurors. This led to an excitement and protest. Northern capitalists began to appear in the state. They were at first welcomed. Men of capital are coming from the north by every steamer in view of investing in cotton and rice. We are glad to see such a lively trade in South Carolina. It benefits everyone. Later, and especially when they began to take part in politics, they were loaded. They were loaded with every accusation. Some of them were army officers, others employees of the Freedmen's Bureau. Some were farmers, and some religious and educational leaders. Black people naturally turned to them for leadership and received it. They helped organize black people in union leagues in order to teach them citizenship and united action. Northerner visitors continued to come. Senator Harry Wilson of Massachusetts spoke at Charleston. After 4 bloody years, liberty triumphed, and slavery has died to raise no more. The creed of equal rights, equal privileges, and equal amenities for all men in America is hereafter to be the practical policy of the Republic. Never vote unless you vote. Never vote unless you vote for the country which made you free. Register your name. Vote for a united country. Vote for the old flag. Vote for a change in the Constitution of the state that your liberties may be consummated. Under the Reconstruction Law of 1867, and 46,882 whites and 80,550 black people voted. The planter class refrained from participation in hopes that the scheme would fail. Total registration, whites, 46,882. Black people, 80,550. A total of 127,432. For the convention, 2,000 whites, 2,350. Black people, 66,418, with a total of 68,768. Oh my gosh. Against the convention, white people, 2,278. Black people, 0. Total, 2,278. Non-voting, 42,354. Black people, 14,132, with a total of 56,486. Majority for convention, the total of 66,490. In the 10 of the 31 counties, there were white majorities, and in the remaining 21 counties, black majorities. Party conventions began to meet. The first one was that of the Union Republican Party, which met in Charleston with nine county representatives. It adjourned to Columbia, where 19 counties were represented. It was attended by people of color and white men, including some Southern men like Thompson R. Robinson, a wealthy native. I don't like it when they use native. I don't know if that's an indigenous person or someone that was born there. I bet it was someone that was born there. I hate when they use native, honestly. The action among whites led to 3 parties. Governor Orr and his party accepted the Reconstruction Acts and planned to work with black people. Wade Hampton proposed to accept the acts, but only with the idea of finally dominating the black vote and having black people follow the lead in their former masters. Hampton owned large plantations in South Carolina and Mississippi. No wonder. The New York Herald summarized his views as follows, quote, he appealed to black people, lately his slaves, as his political superiors, to try the political experiment of harmonizing with their late white masters before going into a political service of strangers. The broad fact that the 2 races in the South must henceforth harmonize on the political basis to avoid a bloody conflict in the ground covered by Wade Hampton, end quote. The third party was led by former Governor Perry and Thompson W. Wade Woodward. And this is what they say, quote, "Strange to say," wrote Perry, "there are many persons in the southern states whose high sense of honor would not let them adopt the 14th Amendment, who are now urging the people to swallow voluntarily the military bills regardless of honor, principle, or consistency. If the state were forced to acquiesce in the tyranny of Congress," he added, "she need not embrace the hideous thing. If we are to wear manacles, let them be put on by our tyrants, not ourselves." He argued that fully of an attempt to control the black vote. General Hampton and his friends, he asserted, had just as well tried to control a herd of wild buffaloes as the black vote. Woodward was violent in denouncing the compromisers. Quote, "Why, oh why, my southern inwards worshippers," he cried, "will you grope your way through this worse than Egyptian darkness? Ooh. Why not cease to crawl on your bellies and assume the upright form of men? Jesus, stop, I pray you, your efforts at harmony, your advice about conventions, what's this word? I know the next word's insinuations. We're gonna look up this word. It's a big word, everybody. Probably hear me spell it. Let's see here. It's Pussillanimous. Pusillanimous. Someone who is cowardly, timid, or lacks courage and resolution. Pusillanimous insinuations about confiscation, etc. Or you will goad these people by flattery to destruction before they have a chance to pick out the cotton crop. This dude was fuck this dude. Perry proposed to appeal to the courts and advised that whites to register and vote against the Constitutional Convention. The Convention of Whites was held a week before the Constitutional Convention, with 21 of the 31 districts represented. This convention made cooperation on the part of black people of any intelligence utterly impossible. It declared, here's what it declared: the fact is patent to all that black people is utterly unfitted to exercise the highest function of a citizen. We protest against this subversion of the social order whereby an arrogant, an ignorant, and deprived race is placed in power and influenced above the virtuous, the educated, and the refined. Geez, these guys suck. The nation was informed that the white people of South Carolina, quote, would never acquiesce to black equality or supremacy, end quote. The president of the convention complained that the declaration were filled with adjectives and epithets, which put a weapon in the hands of the enemy of the movement. The state convention, when I met, had black members for the first time in the history of the state. 76 of the 124 delegates were people of color. As in Mississippi and elsewhere, a number of the planter class had already contemplated on the effort to control the black vote, and thus quickly to get rid of military rule. On the other hand, black people, because of the educated free black element, some considerable talent among the slaves, and the influx of black people from the North, showed unusual foresight and modesty. The convention was earnest and on the whole well conducted. Of the 76 men of color, it is said 57 had been slaves. Quote, the native whites felt, said the correspondents of the New York Times, quote, that the destinies of the state were safer in the hands of the unlettered Ethiopians than in those of the whites of the body, end quote. Beyond all question was the effusive comment of the Charleston Daily News. The best men in the convention are members of color. Consider the influence under which they were called together and their imperfect acquaintance with parliamentary law. They have displayed, for the most part, remarkable moderation and dignity. They have assembled neither to pull wires like some, nor to make money like others, but to legislate for the welfare of the race to which they belong. There were 27 Southern white members of the convention, some of them honest and earnest, and some of them with questionable antecedents. One of them had made up a purse to buy a cane from Brooks after he had assaulted Sumner. Another had assisted to haul down the Union flag from Fort Sumter. A third had been a slave trader. Among the Northerners were people of color and white men of education and character, as well as some adventurers. To the chagrin of many white onlookers, the convention was not a disorderly group. Delegates did not create, quote, the black bedlam, which tradition was associated with them. President McKay said that he had, quote, no unpleasant reminiscence of those acrimonious bickering, which in all deliberative assemblies are often incidental to the excitement of debate and the attrition of the antagonistic minds. Are you there, Joe? They must not be there. They probably fell asleep. They just got back from the trip, so they fell asleep most likely. Oh, kind of. Okay. There is no tendency to insult the white South, and even difference was paid to the defeat of Confederate soldiers. This was in striking contrast to the wild and unscrupulous attacks made by the press upon this convention. Some call the experiment, quote, the madness most unscrupulous and infamous revolution in history, and said that it was snatching power from the hands of the race that settled the country and transferred it to its former slaves and quote, arrogant and feeble race, end quote. The representatives of one paper was expelled from the floor for sneering at, quote, the ringed, striped, and streaked convention, end quote. Other papers received all possible courtesies, yeah. The real basis of opposition to the new regime was economic. Nothing showed was this clear than one fact, and that is that the chief and repeated accusation against the convention and succeeding legislated accusation against the convention and succeeding legislators was that they were composed of poor men, white and black. The white 47 delegates were said to have paid altogether $761 in annual taxes, of which one conservative paid $508. The total taxes paid by the 74 black people were $117, of which a Charleston black person paid $85. 23 of the whites and 59 of the people of color paid no taxes whatsoever. In a day when property was scarce, no matter how secured, and in a state where it had been politically supreme, this attitude was understandable. Yet one wonders just what was expected, since the great majority of the white people of the state had been kept in ignorance and poverty, and particularly all of black people were slaves whose education was paneled offense. One would hardly expect universal suffrage to put rich men in the legislature, and to put rich men in legislate. It was singularly to the credit of these voters, and property was so well presented. It showed certain tendency towards a dictatorship of the proletariat. The Taxpayer Convention of 1871 frankly proposed to restore the power of property by giving 60,000 taxpayers voting power equal to 90,000 non-taxpayers. So to quell the supposedly working class movement, they just, okay, yeah. They made no, don't do that. Let's give you some clout. Let's give you some what was the black man thinking and saying in these days? There was abundant evidence of clear and logic thought among his leaders. The South Carolina black people approached their new responsibilities with a due sense of difficulty and responsibility. Beverly Nash, a black ex-slave, a member of the Constitutional Convention, born in slavery, said, "I believe, my friends and fellow citizens, we are not prepared for this suffrage, but we can learn. Give a man tools and let him commit to use them, and in time he will learn a trade. So it is with voting. We may not understand it at the start, but in time we shall learn to do our duty. We recognize that Southern white men as the true friends of the black man. We see upon that banner the words, quote, 'United we stand, divided we fall,' end quote. And if you could see the scroll of the society that banner represents, you would see that white men and black men stand with their arms locked together as a type of friendship and the union which we desire. It is not our desire to be a discordant element in the community, or to unite the poor against the rich. The white man has the land, the black man has the labor, and the labor is worth nothing without capital. We must help to create that capital by restoring confidence, and we can only secure confidence by electing proper men to fill our public offices. In these public affairs, we must unite with our white fellow citizens. They will tell us that they have been disenfranchised, yet we tell the North that we shall never let the halls of Congress be silent until we remove that disability. Can we afford to lose from the councils of states our first men? Can we spare judges from the bench? Can we put fools or strangers in their position? No, fellow citizens, no. Gloomy indeed would be the day. We want to charge of our interest only our best and ablest men. And then with a strong pull and a long pull and a pull together, up goes South Carolina. Both Sumner and Stevens had encouraged black people of South Carolina to seek sympathetic Southern whites as their leaders. Oh my gosh. But neither they nor others suggested any plans of union with white labor. White Carolinian labor was unintelligent, with absolutely no intelligent leadership except the planters and the carpetbaggers. When the convention opened, ex-Governor Orr was invited to address them. In his speech, he stressed that the fact that the freemen needed education and that they did not represent the intelligence nor wealth of the state. And he recommended limited suffrage, a homestead law, and education. Ugh. The plight of debtors after the losses and changes of the war brought much debate in the Constitutional Convention. A white delegate advocated a three months moratorium on debt collection, and people of color member supported the proposal. But Cardozo, a man of color, and later the treasurer of the state, said, I oppose to the passage of this resolution. The convention should be certain of the constitutionality of their acts. The law of the United States does not allow the state to pass a law impairing the obligation of contracts. This, I think, is therefore a proper subject for the judiciary. I am heartily in favor of relief, but I wish the convention to have nothing to do with the matter. R.G. Delarge, a person of color delegate, afterward landed commissioner, said, It has been said in opposition to this measure that the purposed legislation was for a certain class. However, no gentleman can raise and argue that the proposed measure is for the benefit of any specific class. I hold in my hands letters from almost every section of the state addressed to members of the convention, crying out for relief. These letters depict a strong language of the impoverished condition of the people and demand that something should be done to relieve them. I deny the toto that this is a piece of class legislation, and I believe nothing but a zeal of the members who spoke yesterday induced them to speak of it as such. It is simply a request to General Canby to relieve the necessity of a large part of the people of the state. Some members have gone further and said it was a shame to keep a freeman from becoming purchasers and owners of land. It has been argued that the execution of the laws compelling the sales of land will benefit the poor man by affording him an opportunity to get possession of the lands. The argument, I am confided, cannot be sustained. If they are sold, they will be sold at public sales. Hold on a second. I gotta do a dang puzzle piece. Jesus Christ. Or at public sales and sold in immense tracts, just as they are at present. They will pass into the hands of a merciless speculators who will never allow the poor man to get an inch without first drawing his life's blood in payment. The poor freemen are the poorest of the poor and unprepared to purchase land. The poor whites are not in conditions to purchase land. The facts are the poor class are clamoring, and their voices have been voiced far beyond the limits of South Carolina, away to the seat of the government, appealing for assistance and relief from actual starvation. The problem of the land came in the earlier consideration. The landless, it was felt, should be aided in acquirement of property, and the landed aristocracy discriminated against. It was proposed that Congress be petitioned to lend the state $1 million to the use in the purchase of land for people of color, that the legislature be required to appoint a land commission, and that homestead up to certain value be exempt from the levy of processes. One must view this action in light of what had been taken with regard to land in South Carolina. When Northern forces captured Port Royal in November 1861, the federal authorities took over 195 plantations and employed over 10,000 former slaves as raising cotton. Early in 1861, they imported labor superintendents from the north and organized the enterprise. In July 1862, the Congress laid a direct tax on the land of the states in rebellion. Then, when the absentee landholders in Port Royal failed to pay, their plantations were sold at public auctions to satisfy a part of the debt of $363,570, which had been imposed upon South Carolina. Considerable other property, which was regarded as abandoned, was seized in Charleston. The land the land that were auctioned off were bought largely by Northerners, although a few black people who had got hold of a little money from their labor bought certain plantations. On January 16, 1868, General Sherman issued his celebrated Field Order number 15, all the sea islands from Charleston to Port Royal and adjoining lands to the distinct distance of 30-mile inland were set aside for the use of black people who had followed his army. General Saxton executed this order and divided 485,000 acres of land among 40,000 black people. They were given, however, only possessory titles, and in the end, the government broke its implied promise and drove them off the land. Of course it did. In the convention, the whole matter of land for the landless came up for considerable debate. Cardenzio said that he did not believe in confiscation of property, but since slavery was gone, the plantation system must go with it. Wiper, another man of color, was more inclined to protect the interests of the planters and reminded the members that they were representatives of all classes in the community and not simply of a particular class. This debate on the economic situation was prolonged. All contracts and liabilities for the purchases of slaves where the money had not yet been paid were annulled. J.J. Wright. It says color. I don't know if they're saying J.J. White is a person of color, but they have J.J. White and then they have color with E.D. So I don't know. Maybe J.J. Wright is a person of color. That's only would make sense to me. And later, a Supreme Court judge said of this measure, quote, "I know it is said by our opponents that we are an unlawful assembly and that we are an unconstitutional body. I know we are here under the laws of Congress, lawfully called together for the discharge of certain duties and the repudiation of debts contracted for slaves. It is the duty of the convention to do what? It is the duty to destroy all elements of institutions of slavery. If we do not, we recognize the right of property in man. A homestead law to the value of $1,000 in real estate of $500 in personal property was passed. Rainey declared that Congress would probably never pass an act confiscated the land. But other people of color members, included Renzier, wanted to petition Congress for a loan of $1 million to purchase land. A people of color delegate said on this matter, "My colleagues presented a petition asking the Congress of the United States to appropriate $1 million for a specific purpose, to purchase homesteads for the people of South Carolina, not the people of color, as the gentleman from Barnwell has attempted to prove, but to all, irrespective of color. He was also attempted to prove that the money cannot be obtained, but was failed to carry conviction to the minds of any of the members. There is plenty of land in the state that can be purchased for $2 an acre, and 1 million will buy us 500,000 acres. Cut this into small farms of 20 acres, and we have 25,000 farms, averaging 7 persons to a family that 20 acres can sustain. And we have 175,000 persons, men, women, and children, for $1 million will be furnished means of support. That is 1/4 of the entire people of the state." Mr. R.C. Dellarge, person of color I'm thinking, continued on the same subject. "There are over 1,000 freemen in this state who, within the last year, purchased land from the native whites, fuck off, on the same term. We propose that the government should aid us in the purchase of more lands to be divided into small tracts and given on the above mentioned credit to homeless families to cultivate their support. It is well known that in every district the freemen are roaming from one side to another, not because they expect to get land, but because the large landholders are not able to employ them and will not sell their land unless the freemen have the cash to pay for them. These are facts that cannot be contradicted by the gentleman from Barnwell. I know one large landholder in Clinton district who had 21 freemen and freemen working for him upon his plantation the entire year. He raised a good crop, but the laborers had not succeeded in getting any reimbursements for their labor. They are now roaming to Charleston and back, trying to get remuneration for their services. We propose to give them land and to place them in a position by which they will be enabled to sustain themselves. In doing this, we will add to the dilapidated treasury of the state. The large plantation system of the country will be broken up. The large plantation will be divided into small farms, giving support to more people and yielding more taxes to the state. It will bring out the whole resources of the state. I desire it to be distinctly understood that I do not advocate this measure simply for the benefit of my own race. After much discussion by various white members on the same subject, Mr. F.L. Cardozo, person of color, voiced and thought of men of color who demanded that the government furnish land for the freemen. The poor freemen are introduced by many congressmen to expect confiscation. They held out the hope of confiscation. General Sherman did confiscate, gave the land to freemen. And if it were not for President Johnson, they would have them now. The hopes of the freemen have not been realized, and I do not think that asking for a loan of $1 million to be paid by a mortgage upon the land will be half as bad as been supposed. I have been told by the assistant commissioner that he has been doing on the private scale that this petition proposes. I say very important importunity? I can't say the damn word. Let's find out what it is. I know the word, I just can't say it. I don't know why. Opportunity. Duh. Opportunity. Opportunity of helping people of color should be seized upon. I think the adoption of this measure should be seized upon. We should certainly vote to some measure of relief for the men of color, as we have to the white man who mortgaged their property to perpetuate slavery and whom they have liberated from their bonds. Mr. W.J. Whipper, person of color, was more conservative and only wanted protection for the immediate monopoly. The present owners will be compelled before long to sell portions of their land and sell them to freemen or whoever can pay for them. But if sold now, they will be sold in large bodies or large tracts so that nobody but a capitalist will be able to buy. This demand for land was characterized by the demagoguery by the property holders. What land was, as many speakers suggest, the economic means of raising the level of the electorate. A petition was passed by a great majority asking Congress to appropriate funds for buying land. But Senator Wilson replied that this was impractical, and the convention thereupon created a state commission for buying lands and selling them to the freemen. The conventions attacked race discrimination squarely, and a man of color, Dr. B.F. Randolph, offered the following amendment, quote, distinction on the account of race or color. In any case, whatever shall be prohibited, and all classes of citizens, irrespective of race and color, shall enjoy all common equal and political privileges, he said. It is doubtless the impression of a member of the convention that the Bill of Rights, as it stands, secures perfect political and legal equality to all people in South Carolina. It is a fact, however, that nowhere is it laid down in the instrument empathetically and definitely that all the people of the state, irrespective of race and color, shall enjoy equal privileges. Our forefathers were no doubt anti-slavery men, and they intended that slavery should die out. Consequently, the word color is not to be found in the Constitution or Declaration of Independence. On the contrary, it states all men are created equal, free and equal. In our Bill of Rights, I wanted to settle the question forever by making the meaning so plain that the wayfaring man, though a fool, cannot misunderstand it. The majority of the people of South Carolina who are rapidly becoming property holders are people of color citizens and descendants of the African race who have been grounded down by the 300 years of degradation. And now that the opportunity is afforded, let them be protected by their political rights. The words proposed is an amendment which are calculated to create distinctions, but to destroy distinctions. And since the Bill of Rights did not declare equality, respective of race or color, it was important that they should be inserted. Thus, the discrimination of race and color were abolished by the Constitution, and practical applications were attempted in the case of the public schools and the militia. The convention framed the most liberal provision for the right of suffrage that any of the Southern constitutions provided. They did not attempt, as in Virginia, Alabama, and Mississippi, to restrict the voting of whites further than was provided by the Reconstruction Act. Indeed, Whipper, a delegate of color, wished to petition Congress to remove all political disabilities from the white citizens. In this, Cardozo and Nash agreed, and the motion was passed. Of course, they made no distinction in race and color. The rights of women were enlarged. The property of married women could not be sold for their husbands' debts. And for the first time in its history, the state was given a divorce law. Education was discussed in length, and a free common school system voted for. It is sufficient to say here that for the first time, the fundamental law of the state carried the obligation of universal education and demanded the creation of a school system like that of the northern states. Nothing that the convention did aroused more opposition among property-holding whites. In the first place, as a white woman told a northerner teacher, quote, "I do assure you that you might as well try to teach your horse and mule to read as to teach these N-words." Jesus Christ. In the second place, the whites calculated that the school system would cost $900,000 a year, and that the new taxation would fall upon them. In the debate on the school system, there was not a moment's hesitation, but there was considerable differences of opinion as whether education should be made compulsory or not. D.C. DeLarge said in the debate, "The schools may be open to all, but to declare that parents shall send their children to them whether they are willing or not is, in my judgment, going to step beyond the bounds of prudence." Is there any logic or reason in inserting in the Constitution a provision which cannot be enforced? Mr. R.A.J. Rencier, person of color, said, "I am sorry to differ with my colleagues from Charleston on this question. I contend that the proportion to the education of the people, so is their progress in civilization. Believing this, I believe that the committee has properly provided for the compulsory education to all children in the state between the ages named in the section." Mr. J.A. Chestnut, person of color, spoke on the separation in schools. Has not this convention the right to establish a free school system for the poorer classes? Then if there be a hostile disposition among the whites, an unwillingness to send their children to school, the fault of their own, not ours. Look at the idle youth around us. Is the sight not enough to invigorate every man with the desire to do something to remove this vast weight of ignorance that presses the masses down? I have no desire to curtail the privileges of free men, but when we look at the opportunities neglected, even by the whites of South Carolina, I must confess that I am more than ever disposed to compel parents, especially of my own race, to send their children to school. If the whites object to it, let it be so. Mr. F.L. Cardozo said, it was argued by some yesterday with some considerable weight that we should do everything in our power. Yeah. Wait, what? Yeah. It was argued by some yesterday with some considerable weight that we should do everything in our power to incorporate in the Constitution all possible measures that will conciliate those opposed to us. No one would go further to conciliating others than I would, but we should be careful of what we do to conciliate. In the first place, there is an element that is opposed to us, no matter what we do, which we will never be conciliated. It is not that they are opposed they're opposed so much to the Constitution they may frame, but they are opposed to us sitting in the convention. Their objection is of such a radical and fundamental nature that any attempt to frame a constitution to please them would be abortive. In the next place, there are those who are doubtful. The gentlemen here say if we frame a constitution to suit these parties, they will come over to our side. They are only waiting to see whether or not it will be successful. Then there is the third class, who honestly questions our capacity to frame a constitution. I respect that class, and I believe if we do justice to them, laying our cornerstones on a sure foundation of Republican government and liberal principles, the intelligence of that class will be conciliated, and they are worthy of conciliation. Before I proceed to discuss the question, I want to divest it of all false issues and imagery consequences that some gentlemen have illogically thought will result from the adoption of this section with the word compulsory. They affirm that if compelled, the attendance of both whites and children of color in the same schools. There is nothing of the kind in the section. I simply say that all children shall be educated. But how? It is left with the parents to decide. It is left to the parents to say whether the child should be sent to public or private school. There can be separate schools for whites and people of color. It is left so that if any person of color child wishes to go to a white school, it shall have the privilege of doing so. I have no doubt in most localities, people of color will prefer separate schools, particularly until some of the present prejudice against their race is removed, which has never been removed. Oh, hello, Yusuf. See what we can do for you. The committee proposed that persons coming of age after 1875 must be able to read and write before voting. But Cardozo opposed it because he said it would take more than 10 years and a great deal of money to complete the system, and he wanted to extend the time to 1890. 3 other members of color spoke against any qualification, and it was therefore stricken out. The bridge over the interval before the state school system could be installed Mr. B.F. Randolph, person of color, presented the following petition, which was referred to the committee as miscellaneous provision of the Constitution. We, the undersigned people of South Carolina, in conventions assembled, do hereby recommend that the Bureau of Refugees, Freemen, and Abandoned Lands be continued until the restoration of civil authority, and then the Bureau of Education be established in order that the efficient system of schools be established. Perhaps the conventions achieved the greatest permanent importance was the reform of local and judicial administration. Judicial circuits were to be called counties, and some new counties were arranged. The court of probate was established in each county, and justice of the peace were given wider jurisdictions. Judges were to be elected instead of appointed, and in spite of much criticism, the new system worked well. From 1870 to 1877, the Supreme Court was composed of a black person, a native Southerner, and a Northerner. Its administration was fair and its decision just. Most of the circuit judges were native whites and honest men. Mixed jurors were the rule, and no fault was found with them. They did not hesitate to convict people color prisoners. The trial judges came in for the greatest criticism. Among them were numbers of arrogant, ignorant, and unqualified persons, and there were a good deal of misappropriations of fees and costs. On the other hand, it was difficult to get proper trial judges because so many qualified whites refused to serve. Right, a black person who was on the Supreme Court was a first man of color admitted to the bar in Pennsylvania. He had been connected with the Freedmen's Bureau, then became a member of the Constitutional Convention and a state senator. He was elected to the bench in February 1870 to be filled out in unexpired terms, and was re-elected in December 1870 for the full term. He resigned under Hampton in August 1877. Although he lisped, Wright was a good speaker, decidedly intelligent, and generally said to be the best fitted man of color in the state for the position. Some reforms were made in the county government. Most of the officers were to be elected by popular vote, and boards of commissioners were appointed for the highway and for collections and disbursements of taxes. Some of the delegates wanted to legislate concerning wages, which caused great indignation among the planters. And some said it was suggested, for instance, that the planters be required to pay back wages from the time of the issue of the Emancipation Proclamation, and that the division of 1/2 of the crops for tenant farmers be made compulsory. Such legislation was inherently just and reasonable, but 50 years too early for public opinion in any modern country. Among other things, the Constitution abolished imprisonment for debt and dueling, and did away with property qualifications for voting or upholding office. Members of color, despite their inexperience, gave evidence here and there of care and thrift. For instance, when the question of the pay of members of the convention came up, a discussion arose. Mr. L.S. Langley moved that the pay per diem of $12 in bills receivable be laid on the table. J.J. Wright moved that $10 be inserted. N.G. Parker White moved to fix the pay at $11. C.P. Leslie, person of color, demurred. I desire to say a word before the resolution be passed. I put and be put right on record. I am perfectly willing to receive $3 per day in greenbacks for my service. I think that some all they are worth. And further, if I got any more, it would be so much more than I have been in the habit of receiving. I might possibly go on a spree and lose the whole of it. Now I ask any of the delegates in this body, if they were called upon to pay a similar body of men out of their pocket, how much they would be willing to pay each member. I will stake my existence on it. They would not pay more than $1.50 per day to each member. I wanted to be recorded as always being opposed to a high tariff, but not against any reasonable compensation. But this $8 or $9 a day, when we consider all the surroundings and conditions of the people, look too much like a fraud. The next Constitution of South Carolina was adopted by the convention in April 1868. It was eventually adopted by the people, 70,000 votes voting for it, 20,000 against it, and 35,000 abstaining. Hey, Boken. The Constitution was written in good English and was an excellent document, embodied some of the best legal principles of the age. The letter was as good as any other constitution the state has ever had, or as most American states had at that time. The assertion is supported by the practical endorsement, which is subsequent generations of South Carolinians given it. The conservative whites were content to live under it for 18 years after they received control of the state government, and when in 1895 they met to make a new constitution, the document they produced had many of the features of the constitutions of 1868. It was not, of course, an original document, either in form or word, but copied largely from northern state models. But men of color discussed it, amended it, and voted for its adoption. They shared in the capacity and thought that made it. A convention of whites held in Columbus, April 2nd, condemned the Constitution as the work of 60-odd black people, many of them arrogant and deprived, together with 50 white men, outcast of northern society and southern renegades, betrayers of their race and country. Its franchise provision were declared to be besigned to further ambition of, quote, mean whites, is judicial system repugnant to our customs and habits and of thought, the homestead provision a snare of deceit, and a stupendous school arrangement, a fruitful source of hooklant corruption. Here spoke capital land. Here spoke capital land and privilege against white and black labor. In the spring of 1868, the Fairfield Herald declared the revolution, quote, the wildest, most unscrupulous and famous revolution in history, which has snatched the power from the hands of the race which settled the country and transferred it to its former slaves, an arrogant, ignorant, and feeble race. Ew. End quote. Indeed, the criticisms here was just a boundless and intemperate as that directed later towards the expenditures of the legislator. Only in this case, we have the evidence of the Constitution itself to show how excellent a document it was. The economic revolution which Reconstructed involved, overshadowed, and guided all thought and action. Usury laws had been replaced by the planters in 1866. The rates of interest rose to 25 to 30%. Banks commonly charged from 18 to 24%. The owners of land and property, the persons of intelligence and social prestige, despite their partial impoverishment of the war, were strong and well organized. They put the whole blame on abolition of slavery, enfranchisement of labor, and refusal of black men to work under essentially the same conditions as former. But okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna do a bookmark right here. 448. I'm gonna look ahead. 448. Oh my God. What page am I on already? I'm on, nope. Okay, go back. Going back. I'm gonna find a place to stop at. Okay. But person of color Congressman Rainey of South Carolina well said in the 42nd Congress, if the country there is impoverished, it has certainly not been caused by the fault of those who love the Union, but it is simply the result of a disastrous war widely waged against the best government known to the world. Jesus Christ. The murder of unarmed men and the maltreatment of helpless women can never make restitutions for the losses, which are the simple and inevitable consequences of the rebellion. The faithfulness of my race during the entire war in support of projecting the families of their masters speak volumes in their behalf. As to the real kindness and their feelings towards the white people of the South. Let's see here. I think this might be a good spot. What do you think? That might be a good stopping point. We're gonna stop right here. I was enjoying reading this. I had a little difficult time being fluent, but I did all right. So they're still mulling over what to do with black people and stuff like that, and poor whites and shit like that. Okay, it's let me remove it. Hold on. 448. All right. Does anybody want to come up? Anybody want to come up and talk about what we just talked about? I need some time to mull this over, because it talks about like still not. Why is it so hard? It's so hard for these people just to give out things, to do the correct things. It's so hard. And I still do this kind of shit now these days too. You know? Like, yeah. All right. No one wants to come up? All right then.